welcome to Crashing Convos. This podcast is all about exploring the ups and downs of life, wellness, resilience, and everything in between through the arts of conversation. We'll also dive into deep discussions on existential questions, philosophical thoughts, and how we are a part of something bigger. By sharing my experiences along with those of my guests, I hope to bring you inspiration and a sense of direction through connection, which may help the listener begin to understand and unravel some situations they may be facing. To support this podcast, please subscribe, like, or share with someone you feel it may help. Thank you for your time and your presence.
Strange. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Crashing Combos. This episode was not, I was supposed to have a guest on, but hopefully they're okay. Sometimes this happens when running a podcast, but either way, I'm pushing out an episode every 2 weeks. So I'm going to give this a go and go on my own. There's some thoughts that I've been thinking about for a while, right? And one of the pillars or purpose of this podcast is, as I say in the intro, is to see that we're a part of something bigger. And I've been stripping away this notion for at least since I retired from the military, in various ways. That's one, going down different ideologies and religions and try to understand why people believe what they believe. And even though there have been some that resonated with me, and I still try to practice these. And when I say practice, I mean to try to keep balance of all things, right? And Buddhism talks about this, Taoism talks about this, and it's not living in excess. I mean, I think that's relative to each person, right? Some people will feel that just these things in this room is excess. And I do still feel like I need to strip away things in my life. And I've been doing that through something as learning how to kind of live without getting rid of things. Anyways, I say all that to say, I've been stripping away the different layers and pulling on my own experiences. One of the things that they talk about in the 12-step program, for those of you that may or may not know by listening to this podcast, I've talked about this before, not necessarily specifically in detail, but I've kind of just used different experiences in that. But at one point in my life, I had taken a knee. I admitted myself to inpatient after an attempt. Through a conversation after the attempt, I was brought to my attention that was an attempt. So my life wasn't going well. I'll just say that. Anybody that goes into inpatient, their life's not going well. And mine was no different at that time. But one of the things, I think it's step 2, it's believing in something greater than yourself, right? And the entire 12-step program, I was on step 1, right? Because I didn't know if I had a problem, right? And I think it's the misconception of what people feel alcoholism is. And that was my thing. As with most military members, that's the one legal substance that you could use to self-soothe or self-medicate. And one thing with alcohol, it's like, I heard one guy say, the more you take, the more it takes. And I was on step 1 the entire program. And one thing I did looking back that benefited me, and it actually kind of was try to, when I would hear people's testimonies or stories, and when they would come in of how they became an alcoholic or how alcohol or whatever substance kind of derailed their life, or I would try to input myself into their story and just try to, I don't know if you guys ever remember taking like a test, and there was the Scantron, right? And then you kind of, you had the answer sheet, and then the Scantron, they would like layer on top of it, and you would see which was which answers were right and which ones were wrong, right? Pretty easy thing, right? So I would try to do that. That's the best way I could describe what I was doing is when I would hear their stories, I would use my experiences. I'm like, well, am I addicted? Am I addicted to alcohol? Because I would go on deployments where I couldn't drink and then I would come back and then I would drink, right? And then I gone long stints without drinking. But what the 12-step program taught me was that there's different types of alcoholics or addictions, I should say, not alcoholics, addictions, right? And well, I guess different severities of addiction or like the way it impacts people. Some people can stop drinking forever, and then as soon as they taste alcohol, they freaking go on a binge, right? Or they because they can't stop. And some people can like start and stop uh in the way of like so they drink and then they just freaking have at it until they have their fill and then they stop for a while and then they do it again over so often. So there's different types of addictions, I guess. Different so I kind of found myself and I still didn't understand that, right? Um and I'm kind of going the scenic way, right, to try to explain where what how I got to this, right? So in the 12-step program, it helped me and various other programs that I went through after that. There was always this kind of um this air of like believing in something greater than yourself, right? Um and it's interesting, and the military did this as well, where it was the freedom of religion, right? And we weren't allowed to talk about politics, religion, or I think sex or something like that. Politics, religion, and um sex, I believe. Those are the three things you like because it would create division, right? Those are very strong beliefs that people have, and then it would derail from the mission, right? If we have a, I don't know, we got to do this X thing, and we're bit too busy bickering about whatever, right? Our moral values and compass or what have you, then it creates division. So we weren't allowed to talk about it. Not to say that people didn't, but with that, the 3-step or the 12-step program, as well as any other, they kind of took the same approach. It's like you can believe in whatever you want to believe in. So it started to kind of not only was I dealing with what I was there for, it started to unpackage like more. It started to open more doors, or the idea that there was more doors, right? Like my upbringing, um, how that affected me, just different experiences in my life. How many times that I had like, I mean, this was later on, but like head traumas, all these things, right? There's so many things that kind of make up a person to get them to the mental state that the to that place where they consider taking their life, or even not even that. Like if you're constantly in this state of depression, right? There was this misconception for a while that there was a chemical imbalance and that they had to kind of synthetically kind of bring you up to these different levels. And I'm not saying SSRIs are, I think they're like break glass in case of emergency kind of thing, right? Like if you're in a really bad place and you need to be stabilized to allow you the time to ingest the information that they're trying to give you with like tools such as CPT, CBT, so processing therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's EMDR. There's a bunch of different approaches that you could take to try to get down to the boil. And you shouldn't be taking any type of mood stabilizers or antipsychotics without any type of treatment, you know? Unfortunately, some of these are kind of given to people indefinitely, and that was the approach for me. I made a different decision for that. But with that, there was always this layer, right, of believing in something greater than yourself. And honestly, I got away from that, right? I got away from believing in something greater than myself because when I grew up, and it's no fault to my parents. I hope that anybody that listens to this, I'm like, man, this dude's always, trying to blame his parents or whatever. And like, no, it's not that at all. Like, I respect the hell out of my parents. They did whatever they could for us. I was one of 6 kids, um, and they provided everything we needed for and then some, right? And sometimes we went without, but I'm grateful for those times and those experiences because it's helped me appreciate what what it is to not have, and then when I do have, it's like, oh, thank God I have this. Um, and it's being grateful, right? And that's been a long journey for me. And I would imagine for a lot of people, especially if you're finding this podcast and you're trying to understand whatever it is that you're going through. And I'm not saying I have all the answers. And that's why I have guests on, right? I have guests to share their experiences, their stories of resilience and how they got to where they got to, because I believe you, the listener, can strip away what you that will work for you and what resonates with you, and then use what you've learned and apply it, right? Or at the very least, understand it from a different perspective. That's one of the things I got in group therapy, right? Um, it's not, it's hard to, when you learn, being vulnerable is a skill, right? Because you have to trust that whoever is there is going to respect what you're saying. At the same time, you are, at least I speak for myself, there's a fear of being judged, right? Um, Especially as males, right? Sometimes we compete and sometimes we just never think we thought we've done enough or what have you. And there's so many different layers to that. But like being vulnerable is definitely a skill to learn. And some people are easier, can do it. It comes to easier for them, and others it's challenging. But with that, hearing other people's experiences, even though the experiences were different, the symptoms were the same, right? Depression, hypervigilance, not being able to sleep at night, depression. I already said depression. Or there was the opposite side, right? Where it's like high anxiety. There's just a series of different symptoms that you'd be like, oh man, like that's something we could connect on. That's at least that's how I would see it. Like, oh man, I'm not alone. I would hear that, like, you're not alone, but it was just like, what you're telling me that, but I still feel alone in this, whatever this is, whatever this is that I don't understand. And I'm coming to you, the practitioner, uh, to fix me, right? That's essentially what I was kind of at this, like, uh, end of my line, so to speak. I tried everything I was doing was not working. And I learned that it's just all these things we pick up in life, all these things that happen, and you learn to just keep doing the job, the mission, or what have you. And eventually it will catch up to you. Um, and sometimes it comes in the miss, the most inopportune time. So like, let's say, I don't know, you your significant other says something and it just sets you off, or it's just like, I don't know, you get a flat tire and you just freaking lose it. It's never about that last thing. It's like, that's kind of like the final domino. There's all these other things that lead up to that. There's just like a closet that has all these things that you pushed in there and you stuffed in there and you freaking used your whole body to like push the door in. And then somebody's like, hey, what's in this closet? And then everything just falls out, right? But you don't know that. Like, you don't even know what's in there, right? Because it's just like you close it and you look away and you're like, I don't have time for that, or I don't want to deal with that, or there's all these things that we tell ourselves, right? To continue to live life, right? Fake it till you make it. All these things, right? That you feel like you have to do, or especially in the military, they often preach to service before self, right? Mission first. You're always leaning into helping others. And the longer you're in, the more entrenched those ideas or that habit is for us. I did a little over 20 years in the Air Force, and it's not something you're even aware of until you find the place that I found myself in, right? And this is never fun to talk about, but I talk about these things in the way I talk about them, to that hopefully that somebody's like not in a good place, they could at least understand, or reflect on their own stuff and understand like there is a way out, right? It may not be my way out. It may not, and I mean a way out in the way of overcoming whatever that they're going through and excelling, excelling in life. And it's not going to happen overnight. You're gonna have to systematically start addressing certain things, right? And more often than not, it's stripping away things in your life. So if you're drinking, smoking weed, doing whatever thing that you're doing to self-soothe, it's learning how to move forward without using that. And whether that's cutting back, whether that's, or if it's like, and then start stripping that stuff away and then starting to address your life systematically. So like if you're not sleeping, figure out how to start sleeping, right? If you need, I don't know, it's different for everyone. I'm just going to stay high level with this. So if you're not sleeping, like some of the things I did was, and it was brought to my attention via my wife, right? Like haven't had a TV in the bedroom because like when I was younger growing up, I felt like I had to, in order to sleep, I needed noise, right? I needed some type of background noise, or if not, I can't sleep. I grew up in a house with 6, or 5 siblings, and there was always some type of a noise going on. So I conditioned myself to think that that's the only way I could sleep. And then tinnitus, so I still use white noise. I'm getting sidetracked. So no TV in the bedroom. That was gone. And then I started to try just about everything, right? Instead of turning the light on at night, I, because it's bright, right? And your mind is starting to get ready for bed. So that like all the bright lights that you have on, that tells your brain, right? It starts to tell like your brain, like, hey, the sun is still out and it stays awake, right? So if you can start to systematically before you go to bed is to have like a dimmer light on. In this case, I bought one of those freaking Himalayan salt lamps from like Marshalls or whatever. And I had that in my room. And that was the light that I used before going to bed. I started to use like aromatherapy. So I had like a little diffuser in the room, like with uh what is it called? Lavender. Um, so I started to do all these things, right? Like, cause my sleep is so important that it throws off everything, your mental health, your mood, psychosis, all different things. If you're not sleeping, um, then it's so important. That's why most docs, when you go see them, the first thing at least the ones that I experienced, the first thing they wanted to address was sleep. And they would give you some type of medicine for that, depending on what all your symptoms are, right? So, and then it's diet, right? Addressing diet. And then when I say diet, that has a negative connotation. So addressing what you eat. I realized that Doritos a while back, like I used to one of my go-to snacks was Doritos and French onion dip. I mean, it's an acquired taste for some, but it was something it was from something nostalgic from my childhood that I kind of brought forth, right? Uh, and one time, and it was during this dark time for me. I was I had a whole bag of Doritos with some French onion dip, and well, yeah, and then I started. When you start going to therapy, you start to learn how to be aware of what you're feeling, right? That's one of the positives about it. And you can do that too much, but that's a whole different conversation. So I started to be mindful of how food started to affect me, right? And it might have been through Whole 30, but I digress. So I had this big bag of Doritos, and then next day I woke up feeling like dog shit. I felt horrible. I felt horrible, maybe because that's the Doritos, but the food that we eat now is not the food we had when we were younger. And that's coming into fruition with, regardless of what you think of them, this is bipartisan. I'm an independent, right? I have views on both sides of the fence, and but a lot of the foods that we have now have a bunch of toxins in them, chemicals, that our body affects our body negatively more than it does positively, right? That's why they call it junk food. It's so obvious that it's so overt, it's covert. But with that, so that was like and I haven't had Doritos since, right? I think I had one chip the other day, and that was just like, oh yeah, it's not for me. So I don't do that anymore. But it was like learning to strip away the things that I started to pick up that were affecting me. So sleep, right? So addressing that, getting the TV out of the room, addressing what I was eating. I did a Whole 30 diet. I don't know if you guys know what Whole 30 is, but that's an elimination diet you do for like 30 days. I didn't even have to do it for 30 days. I did like 20 days. And so the idea is like you have a food list of what you can eat. So like no beans, no pasta, like all these things, right? And then after the 30 days, you start to implement these things one by one. And then you kind of pay attention to see how your body's affected, right? No sugar, all these things, right? Sugar, if you guys, I'm pretty sure you guys know, is a cause of inflammation. Um, so as you put these things back in your diet, it starts to you like pay attention, right? Like, oh man, I feel like my stomach hurts or whatever, and then you can kind of either mentally or write it down and like, hey, um this thing I don't want to eat no more, right? Or I assume the risk. I really love pasta or bread, and then when I have it, I know I'm gonna feel like dog shit afterwards, right? But that's a choice, right? Now you're aware of what is affecting you, and on top of that, like you're aware it was affecting you, and then you can move forward in that decision going forward, right? And you can just kind of tailor your diet to yourself, right? Or your food to you. And I know some people, I mean, struggle with releasing things from their life, right? Because it kind of comes part of their identity. I know at one point I used to say something stupid, and I've said this on the podcast before that alcohol would always like beer would always be part of my life, regardless whoever came in my life. I would kind of proudly say that, like um something like if anybody made me stop drinking or beer or whatever, then like they wouldn't be here anymore or something. It was stupid. I think it was an adopted idea that I picked up. But obviously we do a lot of and say a lot of dumb things. And on this podcast, I might say and do a lot of dumb things because I don't know what I don't know. Speaking as honestly as I with the information I know, and I'm speaking from my life experience and with hopes that it will help the listener. So it's like any troubleshooting that you do, you have to eliminate all the additional things that may be causing it, right? But if we're always not even thinking about what we're eating or what we're drinking or what we're doing, whether that's not like staying up late, whether that's being too like hyper aroused in the way of like playing video games all the time and then being on your phone right afterwards and then watching a movie like you're and then driving like your brain is always turned on and it's never bored. Bored is a good thing because boredom allows you just to like go and walk in the woods or whatever. It allows your brain to start resting and it allows you to start kind of ingesting like what you took on that day and start processing and putting things where they are, to maybe like unravel certain problems you're going through. But if you're constantly like either eating all the time, you're overwhelming your digestive system. And two, like you are ingesting all these toxins or chemicals, depending on what you're eating, that are constantly messing with your brain chemistry, or your the way your body operates. And then on top of that, if you're constantly ingesting information with social media, even like podcasts, like podcasts that are not helping you in one way or in the other, but you're just ingesting like trash, right? Like reality TV or whatever. Like you're consuming that all the time, you end up becoming that, right? It's like the old age saying, like, you are what you eat. or you are what you watch. You are what you listen to. Um, and I've talked about this. I mean, this isn't my science, but there is Masaru Emoto. Um, does did a I think it's called the rice experiment. You can look him up, Masaru Emoto. Um, so he identified when you freeze water, but before you freeze water, if you put like an emotion into it, like jealousy, anger, hatred, like you intently look at this molecule as it's freezing. You can look it up. I'm probably jacking it up, but at the very least, you can go look it up yourself. The on the molecular level, the the water, like when you look under a microscope, ju- it would have this design on not design. The molecule would be in a very chaotic, ugly, like pattern. But when you put love, joy, um, any type of positive emotion into that energy into that water as it was freezing, then the geometric it would be a beautiful geometric pattern. So if you take that concept and you apply it to you, because we're primarily water, right? And then you put all this, I don't know, like horror that you watch on TV. And dude, y'all, don't get me wrong. I used to do all these things, right? But not understand. It was ignorance is bliss. Like I didn't understand what it was doing to me, right? So if you're ingesting all this bad information, I don't want to say bad information, negative information, you are eating all this like crappy food. Just think what that's going to do to your mental health. That's what's going to do to your spirit, what it's going to do to you as a person. And then depending who you hang around with, right? There's so many different layers to this, and I'm not saying to attack it all at once. And what I am saying is to be aware of it. And if you choose to, do you want to make a change in your life? Then start one at a time. Because if you try to do all of it at once, it's overwhelming, right? So try to take the one thing that causes the most. I'll just say sleep, right? If you're not sleeping, try to address that first, right? And that could be like no coffee, like no caffeine after uh noon. Some people are like hypersensitive to caffeine. Energy drinks, how many you're drinking, because those things are like I don't know of one energy drink that's good for you. Even like coffee, right? I drink black coffee, but I don't, even that is a diuretic, right? So if you are taking supplements with it, I don't know, like putting like creatine or whatever, like you're gonna flush all that stuff out. Um, so it's the timing of it all, right? But that's the only energy drink I have. I used to do like Rip Its and Monsters. I mean, I wasn't like crazy with my energy drinks, but I used to drink them back in the day. Or like the 5 hour energy drinks when I was like driving for like 12, 15 hours or whatever. I would get these things because like I didn't know any better. And I used to think like, oh, this is somebody is obviously like it's somebody's job, right? The FDA, they're monitoring this stuff. So I'm sure it's good for me. But there's so many layers to that. But let me move on to my next or the thing I was originally talking about. I would say that this is every day is like a work in progress, right? Every day is I'm trying to work on all these things, right? I'm still trying to go to sleep at a certain time. I'm still trying to be physically active. I'm still trying to get sun in the morning. And I'm still doing the lights, at night, like dim the lights, not turning on bright lights. And these started to become habit over time. I eat better. Most of the time I cook my own food because I mean, it's just twofold. One, I don't like going to restaurants and I know I could have cooked the meal better myself, and then you got to pay for it, right? And two, I just enjoy cooking, right? I enjoy making meals to my liking with seasonings, and I know what's going into it. And I also don't cook when I'm angry because it comes out like crap. And then going back to the idea of like water and molecules, and then putting that in 10, you're going to eat that crap. So I know that's very hippie-ish, and if you would ask me like 15 years ago, I would have said, get the hell out of here. Like that's not real. Whatever. You're just being weak or whatever. But these are all things that I've addressed systematically, right? Because I got tired of being in the place where I was, right? I didn't ever want to go back there, right? Um, and so when I retired from the military, that's what I started to do. So the last 7 years, I've just been going down rabbit holes, right? And when I started this podcast, with still the intent to try to help others, right? By sharing our stories or experiences. But I started it with a kind of like it's just a good time. We're having a good time. We're talking. Yes, we're having some serious conversations, and we're like sprinkling humor and all these things, right? But the more I did this, the more I felt the level of responsibility to take this serious. And I'm not saying we can't joke and have fun and stuff, but time and place. Um, and the more people I've met in this space, in the nonprofit space, or in the Yomp I did last year, it, I am learning how to be more um intentful with the podcast, right? To give quality information to you, the listener. One question that was posed to me last year is if I could do anything without like money being an option, and two, like how would I address suicide, right? Suicide prevention to, in a perfect world, stop it. I mean, that's a deep question, and I took a lot of time to think about it. So I started being more intentful this year with the podcast and bringing in, because I wrote down a lot of things that I would work on. But one of the things was resilience. What are the things, like how do people become resilient, and how do they stay resilient no matter what life throws at them? One thing I've learned is you can't do it alone. There are people that say like, "Well, I did it on my own. I got to this place on my own." That's BS. There's always somebody that's helped you, even if you're a businessman, right? You got to get a loan from somewhere, right? Either way, like you had to get whatever resources from someone. Nobody goes to this world on their own, unless you're like an Aborigine or somewhere in South America. But even then, like there's a tribe, right? It's hard to live on your own, to be the lone wolf, right? You can do it on your own. I don't know if that's smart. It's gonna be a lot harder, but it's very rare. We are social beings, humans, and we need connection. Like if you ever watched that show Alone, that the thing that got most people was them being alone. They had a shelter, they had food, they had everything they needed, but they didn't have connection. They didn't have that link to whomever. They had the camera they could talk to, but that wasn't enough. And a lot of them had to just call it. Honestly, I don't know if I could do that, right? Maybe if I knew I was alone and I was on my own, like, and then my family, I didn't have family, that's a different story. But if I knew there was people I loved that I wanted to be with, then, I would obviously want to be with them. So having said that, I don't think we are not meant to be alone, right? Um, and it can feel like that a lot of times. There's probably some of you guys and girls that are listening um, that may feel alone in whatever you're going through. And I will never fully understand. I will never fully understand like what it is to have your experiences and feel alone the way you do, because I didn't live your experience. I didn't go through what you went through. You may hear some things that I talk about that you're like, oh yeah, I went through that. Yes, I can understand to a certain extent, but your life experiences is way different than mine, and we will view the world differently. Which brings me to my point, and kind of why I started this. Um, One of the step two, right, was believe in something greater than yourself. Last 7 years, I kind of alluded to earlier, Buddhism, Taoism, um, even Christianity. There was Islam, right? I looked into that for a little bit because I wanted to understand like all these different philosophies and understandings in the religion, right? And I kept pulling back the layers and pulling back the layers, and I still do to this day, because it truly fascinates me, right? Because that is what the U.S., whether people want to admit it or not, that's what the government is, right? It's built on Christianity, and that you have morals and ethics and laws that are geared towards those beliefs, right? And I mean, granted, the way things have happened like these last 2 years. All right. So for those of you, I got a text from my sister and it kind of threw me off a little bit. So yeah, I went down the different philosophies, right? Islam, Buddhism, um, Christianity. Because what brought me back there was I've addressed all these traumas that I can remember to a certain extent, but the way I interpreted these experiences, these traumas, I was looking through a filter of my experiences growing up. And one of those huge influences was Christianity for me. And that was rough, right? It was rough because I wasn't, at least the way I remember it, I was not allowed to ask questions, because if I asked questions, then it was me questioning God. But had, I've come to the understanding is, how can we expect a child, I'll say for myself, to understand something as grand as God, right? How can we have no life experiences and we're reading this book or being read this book, and which is written in such a way we barely even know how to read at that point, right? Depending on what time we're introduced into Christian or whatever religion, and we're just being downward directed, authoritative. You will believe this, you will do this, you will do that, and yeah, that's most of childhood, right? Like parents telling you what to do. But even in Bible study, even in Bible school or Bible study, I don't know, was it? Yeah, Bible school. Like when I was a kid, asking questions, like the teachers used to get upset, right? At least the way I remember it. I remember I got kicked out of class once. It might have been a question about something about like the animals in Noah's Ark or something. I don't know. Um, but with that, it's believing in something is huge. It's huge. It's huge to recovery. And now I understand why it's step 2. Because when all the world falls away from you, when you don't have the people that you thought were going to be there for you, and you don't have the people that love you, loving you, and let me put like a caveat in there. Even the person that was always there for you will fail you. Humans are, we're not perfect. And we, I mean, you could be there 99, like 99% of the time. And then there's that one time, let's say, I don't know, you're in a meeting and I'm in a meeting and I'm always there for that person. And then they call when they need me the most and I can't answer the phone because my phone's, I don't know, locked away somewhere, or it's just off, or I'm going through something and I can't be there. If you put all your faith in that one person that's a human that will always fail you, at some point or another, they're gonna fail you. Either they die or whatever, right? That's just the nature of it. We all have our own lives. You can't put that much stress on someone. I know because I learned that. I learned, and it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair for me to put that on someone, right? In my darkest time. But when they weren't there, that taught me that I needed to go inward and figure my stuff out. When I was an inpatient and that person wasn't there, I learned like, all right, I can't be using other people as a distraction or my anchor. I need to learn how to be my anchor myself, right? But that will only sustain you for so long. You can grit through it, you can grind through it. And this is like first world problems, right? First world problems in the way of how we're able to have the resources and tools and the awareness that we even have a mental health problem, right? And I don't know why I did that we have a mental health problem. It's even an issue because other countries don't have that. They don't have a place for it because they're just trying to survive. And if you're just trying to survive, then everything else is stripped away. You're just trying to find food, water, and shelter. Those are you're just trying to live. And when societies have it too good, like the United States, whether y'all want to realize it or not, we are blessed to be in the United States. I'm not saying everyone is having a great time and has everything they need, but the majority of people, like if you look at other countries, there's different levels to poverty. I feel like I grew up poor, right? I grew up in the poorest district in San Antonio, and I didn't grow up with some of my relatives. I feel like they had more material things, but when I went to other countries, right? When I went to Africa, Kuwait, wherever, right? There is different levels of poverty, and I saw that, like I saw that firsthand, and that just brings a different understanding to how good we have it here. And granted, there are a lot of things going on right now, and you can say, "What are you talking about?" So that's why it's important to be grateful for what you have right now, today, in this moment, is to look at what you have and be like, I have a roof over my head if you have a roof over your head. Or if you have water, hey man, I have water and I'm going to enjoy every sip of it. I have peace right now. If you have peace right now, I have somebody I love next to me. Appreciate that. Like gratefulness is huge. Going back to the water example I gave you earlier, being grateful for what you have will, and it's been scientifically proven, will change your inner, the atom, your molecular, the water within you will change, as opposed to the opposite, right? Like, oh man, this ain't going right. I can never catch a break. This didn't happen. Can't believe so and so has this and I don't have that. Like just me saying that stuff, like I can feel like something shifting in me, like negatively, and if it feels gross. And I'm not lying. There are times I'm not freaking perfect by any means. There are times, especially like in making videos or what have you, I would see other people being successful, right? Uh, and like, because that is a metric. This is early on. That is a metric where if your videos are like, are not being seen or watched or whatever, because of whatever the algorithm is or whatever like changes that Instagram made or whatever. And I used to catch myself with good people, man, like with good people that I know personally, and I had to like grab it, consciously grab it and be like, what are you doing? No, like I'm happy for them. I'm happy that they're doing that. I had to learn to do that. And it didn't take like a bunch of times. It took like once or twice. Cause then I had to like look at myself like, why are you should be happy for them. Like what have they done wrong to you? Right. But that's a very real thing. And I can't imagine like kids nowadays that they're trying to feel included or feel work on their self-esteem, but to have social media and to compete with, and then have to do what other females are doing, what other males are doing. That's a whole different conversation. But going back to it, it's believing in something, believing in something that's greater than yourself, right? I used to tell people, find something to believe in. Like, don't put in another, like, you could put it in another person, but understand that that's temporary. That person or thing, the freaking goldfish you choose, your pet, or whatever the thing is that you value, right? Whatever the thing is that keeps you moving forward. But that has to be temporary. That's a temporary run to get what you're trying to go. And it's interesting, this like analogy that I'm using, like a ladder, right? That's used pretty common in the recovery space, right? But belief is powerful. Belief, like the Vikings, right? They believed if they died in battle, they were going to Valhalla. They would tell the people before battle, I'll see you, like, if Thor takes, like, if I die in this and Thor takes me, Odin, I'm sorry, not Thor. Odin takes me, then I'll see you in Valhalla. But to truly believe that and to fight knowing that there's something else after, you would fight to the death because there's something else after, right? And I'm not saying that's my faith. I'm just using it as an example, right? Because it's pretty popular in common culture. The placebo effect. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard this before. The placebo effect, if you guys don't know, it's a term that's used, and I'm probably gonna jack this up. I'm not a doctor. Please look this up. But the placebo effect is where they'll give, I don't know, the actual, let's say, cure to a 20 people, and then they'll give a sugar pill to another 20 people in this study, in this control group. And then they tell them all, hey, we're giving you the cure to whatever it is that's ailing you, right? So they give them like they tell them they give them the cure, and the percentages of when people believe that they are being cured, it's almost as effective, if not more effective. Please look this up. Than the real thing, because they believe it. They truly believe that whatever it is that they're getting is going to fit. So that gives you an idea of how powerful the mind is and how we're designed. I feel like we're designed to be. And that's faith. Faith that something's going to work. Faith in something that we are part of something bigger. So I started to go down all these different rabbit holes, right? And what I found was people way smarter than me have been asking the same questions that I was curious about, or they were taking apart myths that, I don't know about myths, but there were thoughts or arguments that I thought, for me personally, like what resonated for me, and I haven't even got into, I've talked about this on the podcast before. There were, and I'll get back to here shortly. They were debunking things such as, well, the Bible, right, was written by over 40 authors. And there, it was written in Greek and then Aramaic. I don't know about Greek. Greek was a common language then. And then I think, and it was transcribed into all these different languages. So it's lost in translation, right? So that's one misconception that I thought for a long time, until I found biblical scholars like debating these things, these same questions, and only to find like how it proves that the Bible is the most, one, talked about, argued about, and three, proven. That's why it's even more accurate, is because of all the historical significance, like of all the places it talks about. But on top of that, how 40 different people wrote about what happened from their experiences, and even though they differ a little bit, but it's all from their experiences. And then there's the 5 gospels, right? Or 4 gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if I'm jacking any of this up, please let me know in the comments. I'm not pulling up any notes right now. I'm just kind of talking from my heart, from my experience, and I'm going somewhere with this. I talked about earlier how belief is in something, and how humans, as people, will always fail one another. 3, how belief is important to when everyone falls away, you have something to connect to. One of the key things that I haven't talked about, well, at least today, right now, is the few times, because we all have to rely on our own experiences, and how I came to believe and truly start to accept Christianity as my faith, was at least a handful of times that I've felt like true fear in the most random places. And it was something I couldn't see, touch, or hear, but I could feel. I could feel something was there, and I knew which direction it was. And the only thing that took it away was me praying to Jesus, right? Because that's all I knew how to do. And I didn't rely, I don't want to say that was the only thing. I didn't know of other ways to rationalize or deal with something like that, but that's the only thing that worked. That's the only thing that took whatever that presence was out of the room away. So that was something. And that I still didn't believe after that. Like I would rationalize it afterwards, like, oh, that was something else, blah, blah, blah. That was just probably because I watched a scary movie or whatever. And like, no, this is different. It's not like you watch a scary movie and you're like trying to like run to the bed and like when you're a kid and you jump over so something doesn't grab you or something's like hiding in the dark. This was different. This is like waking up from either in my room and like just knowing something's there. Or going to a place and you walk into it or it walks into you or it walks in the same area. And it's a feeling I can't describe. And if any of you have felt it, it's unique. But prayer is the only thing that took it away. Fast forward, belief. I chose to believe. I'm choosing. Because every day I wake up and I choose to believe in God. I choose to believe in Jesus, right? Yeshua. And at first I thought it was because of my upbringing, like conditionally, that's the only thing I knew. But based off all the research that I've done, based off of all the people smarter than I that have found God or reference God or Jesus, at least something greater, it's staggering. Like the brilliant minds of our world that many scientists reference and still use their theories today believed in God because they all hit a certain point in their discipline where they couldn't explain it anymore. They knew something else was going on. And there's a bunch of experiments that prove that. I mean, just look at our DNA. Just look at our when I say DNA, or even like breathing, right? Like when you breathe, it's like you say Yahweh when you breathe. And I mean, that's probably like not the best example, but that's what it's saying. Like God put it on our breath or our lips. Maybe I'll take that part out. Disregard the last part because I don't remember specifically what that quote is. But you get what I'm saying. I hopefully you understand what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to convert you into whatever. Like I'm just asking you to consider it. And if you can disprove, and that's kind of where I went. Like if you can disprove the resurrection and you can disprove that he was crucified, and there's tons of historical records that the Romans were really good at crucifying people. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm learning to practice every day. I'm reading more. I still have a bunch of questions. But one of the biggest things I have with Christianity, and it's really I know it took a long way to get here, but it's one of the things that I ran into recently, and it's wild because it's what kept me away from it. I grew up where I wasn't allowed to question, and I had self-righteous people, like kind of be like Pharisees, right? If you don't know what a Pharisee is, they were like the people to uphold the law of Moses, right? So in Luke 12:51-53, Jesus asks if he came to bring peace, answering nay, but rather division, predicting families divided 3 against 2 and against 3. And then in Matthew 10:34-36, he states, I came not to send peace, but a sword, noting that a person's enemies can be members of his household. So when I read that, I don't read it like Jesus was coming to create division, but he was preaching love. And that was contradictory to what people believed it to be, like what the Messiah was. They all had this expectation of what they felt it would be. And that's why he was crucified. He was overthrowing what Moses and Abraham had said was to come. And the goal was to bring unity and love and him sacrificing himself for our sins, right? Don't get me wrong. I sin every day. I try not to. And I try to, because for me, it's like, I've talked about this before. In the military, we would find a leader, right, to follow. Well, most of us, or some of us, I'll speak for myself. Somebody I respected, I wanted to be like them, right? And there's an old adage saying, like, never meet your heroes. But in history, there's no other leaders or people, I guess in this case, a savior, right, that has lived their life, well documented life, right, the way he did, the way he spoke to people, the way he tried to, the apostles he chose, where he came from, of Nazareth, right, where people just looked down upon it. The apostles he chose were imperfect. He saw the strengths in them and he believed in them and preached to them so they would preach his word, right? And I give myself grace in the idea, like the doubts that I have, because even the apostles had seen all these miracles and they still doubted even at the end, until like he was resurrected and in spirit, came back in spirit here for 6 weeks. And then they died for it. They died for those beliefs. I don't know a whole lot of people that are willing to die for a conviction that they believe in, right? Belief is huge. And I've had a lot of other experiences that I cannot explain where I shouldn't be here, right? And I feel like I've taken a long, windy road to get to where I'm getting. One of the major issues that I ran into recently, I got invited to a Bible study. And I know none of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. And I probably didn't handle this interaction in a perfect way. But I was truly trying to understand where the other person was coming from. I got invited to a Bible study, and it was a new one that I've never been to. And I'm really, truly trying to understand these questions that I have, because I feel like some questions, any questions, can be controversial, right? Because of this idea that people feel that you should believe how they believe and believe how they interpret the Bible. Because, as I said earlier, we all were brought up with different experiences in life. We all look through our world with different lenses. So, therefore, we will all, when we read the Bible or any literature, we're going to interpret it through our own experiences that we lived to that point. And to put that view or that conviction on somebody else and then chastise them or accuse them with questioning and with aggression, I don't think that's how I don't think that's how Jesus wanted us to be with one another. And even take that part out, right? If somebody's new to a group, why would you take that approach? And we rewind a little bit. Just before that, or even before I went to the Bible study, I've talked about intuition a lot. I guess in Christianity it's called the Holy Spirit, right? I felt like I was going to have an interaction. Perhaps I was, if I'm being logical, right? And I try to be, or rational, I try to, and that's usually my problem. That's why I struggle believing. That's why I always have more questions. But to be rational, maybe I was going into it with some old, like old feelings from Bible studies I went to in the past. Either way, it held true. Before we were driving out there, I don't know how to say this without sounding crazy, but I just I knew I was going to run into some type of resistance. So before the Bible study, I went to the bathroom and I prayed, right? I prayed that I would be patient enough and strong enough and aware enough and to guide me, right? In however this goes. I ended up having a conversation with the preacher that was leading it prior to, and we both had similar experiences. He got away from the faith early on because of the same thing. He talked about having a deconstruction phase of it, and then got back in as a preacher and was leading this Bible study. I told him I was newly baptized. I got baptized a couple months back, and it's been a long journey for me to get back to this point. And I'm a new Christian, so to speak, right? So I'm coming in with these new questions. I try to read the Bible as much as I can to try to understand it. So we have this conversation about how we're both kind of coming back to it, or not. I'm coming back to it. He's talking about he can relate. And then this happens, right? I start getting questioned, right? And then he starts to accuse the preacher I go to. He starts to accuse him of being a heretic, right? So I start asking more questions, right? Because I'm trying to understand like what this is. And also at the same time trying to push down these old feelings, right? And truly trying to understand what this is, right? Where are we going with this? So I started asking more questions and started getting like our voices naturally started getting louder and louder. And I think I could have handled it better. I mean, I thought I handled it great from who I used to be, because I'm truly trying to understand. And then plus I had the feeling, right, of going into it. I expected it. Preacher kind of interjects, and then this gentleman, like, later on after, like, kind of taking some time, we start the Bible study. He apologizes. I accept his apology. I give him a hug, and because I do feel like there are forces that manipulate and tug at our weaknesses. And all I could do during this whole Bible study was pray for him, right? And I don't say that condescending. Like, I was truly praying for him and I'm not saying like, because that's all I could do. That's all you could do. Like, I've learned that when something is out of your control, that's the best thing you could do is wish somebody well. And it's not like, and, and pray that they come to a better place or an understanding, or because I don't know what someone's going in their life. I don't know what someone is going through. I don't know what struggles they have. I don't know what sicknesses they have or what have you. And I'm truly trying to take Jesus' approach and apply it to my life. Am I Jesus? Heck no. Am I imperfect? Yes. Am I going to mess up tomorrow? Yes. Will I be like judged by others? Yes. Like, there's so many things that I've done wrong to this point that I'm learning to be better about. So what am I trying to say? Why am I sharing this with you? I think one of the major problems with Christianity, I guess with any ideology or any religion, but more specifically Christianity, is humans, imperfect humans. And it's not that I'm fearful of what they might tell me, but I'm more fearful of if I'm saying the right thing and what God and Jesus intended. But I do feel like people should focus on their own relationship with God, because all our paths are different. Regardless how we got here, we got here. And to look at somebody's past, or to look at somebody's journey, or to look at somebody's naive approach, or I don't want to say it, they haven't matured yet to wherever this person or people think that they are. And they feel like it's imperative that they, be authoritative in their approach to fix whatever it is. I think the term I heard was legalistic. Like, they're a lawyer coming to, or judge to judge you. And like, you're turning more people away from God than you are leading to God. And I feel in my heart that the way you do that is by embodying it, or leading with virtue. You can preach to the mountaintops to whoever, but if you're not living the life, then who's gonna, like, why would people listen to you? It's like being a health coach, right? Or being a certified personal trainer, and you look like you haven't worked out a day in your life. Like, why would anybody listen to you? But going back to Christianity and following Jesus, right? If you live your life as close to Jesus as you can, that's like feeding the poor, helping the sick, and at the very least praying for people or praying for yourself, or just trying to every day try to do as do right by God as far as you can. And the Bible talks about like God knows your heart. He knows everything, like he knows your heart. So if you're outwardly projecting how righteous you are, but in your heart you're ugly, then we need to look at ourselves and figure out why the ugliness is there. If it's, and going back to earlier about the closet, keeping all that stuff in, if we don't deal with that in whatever way that is that needs to be dealt with, I don't know if we're ever, I hesitate because I'm like, well, what I do believe that throughout all things are possible through God. So I don't want to limit him in that way. But whatever that is needs to be dealt with. Whether you hand it over to God and then kind of turn over a new leaf or what have you. But the way that most people, what I grew up with, and I do believe that all the things that I've experienced to this point is here for me to use as my testimony, and everything that you've gone through to this point is used, whether you're leading people to God or like trying to get people out of the darkness, is for you to use to help others, assuming that you've done the work and continue to do the work, because this work is never done, to become the better individual for yourself and your family. And with that, I feel God's the same way. The Bible's the same way. Like I don't want to say an instruction manual, but it's a way to live. And all the problems we're dealing with today, they dealt with then. And as crazy as it sounds, that's true. And the only way you'll know that is if you read it. And when I ask you to read the Bible, I'm not telling you, you read it how you read it. I read it as, I started to learn to read it as when I was younger, and I tried to read it when I was not understanding, but two, I was trying to read it like, and trying to believe it at the same time. But for me now, I read it as like I read it in context. So that's looking up what, like the Corinthians, who Paul was talking to, who the Corinthians were, what was going on at the time, Romans, why was Romans written, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let me see, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Yes, I try to read who they were, what they were about, and so forth and so on. I try to read it like a student, I guess, because I naturally have questions. I'm a curious person. So I'm not trying to disprove it. I'm trying to understand it. And I encourage anybody, and I do feel that's what's another thing that's wrong with our world today, as more people are trying to disprove than understand, right? And that's on a spectrum, right? Because there is like blatantly wrong, right? Like going to Epstein files, that's gross and that's wrong, that's evil, right? And if nothing in this world brings you to like the idea that there's good and evil nowadays, I don't know what will. I truly don't know what will. And that's kind of how I came to this understanding, right? I came to understanding I had to consider God, because I accepted at some point through all the paranormal stuff I would watch and the experiences I had growing up and the culture that I live in, with witchcraft and all these other things, and like I understood that, but I wasn't willing to accept the good side, right? And I think that was convenience. And hopefully I'm not detracting too much. Hopefully it's still relative to you, the listener. But I'm kind of just laying this out. At the very basis of it all, there's good and evil. You can't have dark without light. And you can go so forth and so on, right? It goes all day. But if Christianity is the only religion that mainstream won't allow you to talk about, then there's something there. And if the Epstein files is being hidden and then now put out and then kind of just like shuffled away, I don't know. There's something there. And the Bible talks about the ruler of this world being the devil, right? Which is wild, right? Which is wild to accept. But if you look at the world and how everything's being uncovered, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. I've talked about this before. Shortly after I got out of the military and I started to get my life on track, I started to get back in the woods. Not to say I was in the woods before, but I started a mountain bike. I started getting nature. I started to have that alone time. The boredom, right? The boredom I talked about it, which is so good for you earlier. And the physical activity. And then I started to wean off of the SSRIs and antipsychotics I was on from the PTS cocktail that they had me on, and started to kind of get my life on track or my awareness on track. And I started to connect with God. I didn't know that's what it was. I mean, I had a good feeling or something about it. It was something unique, something profound. But I started to get the message. It wasn't like the movies, but it was the inner voice that was like, prepare, 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 like over and over. Like every other day, it would just kind of come and resonating. And this was like back in maybe 2020, 2019. It was 2019. I was talking about 2019. It was right around the time I started this podcast. And crazy enough, I would tell people close to me about this. And I'm like, why am I telling them? Like, even me saying this on this podcast, I feel weird about it because it's back in the day, they would put you in an insane asylum if you said you heard voices, right? I didn't hear them audibly, but it's just like this innate intuition, I guess the Holy Spirit preparing me. I don't know what that means, but since then, I've been staying active, doing what I can. I'm not the strongest person. I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the most athletic person. I'm not the most well-read person. There's all these things that I'm not, right? And that's what I focus on more often than not because I'm human. That's what I do. I focus on what I fall short in, and that's why I didn't put out this message. I don't know, like 4 weeks ago or whenever. I've been feeling the message like to the pull to do it. I just haven't done it, and now I'm doing it. I don't know what this message is, and I know it's kind of all over the place. This is my first time talking this long by myself, and it's kind of strange. I usually like to have a back and forth, but I hope this message lands with you in whatever way it's meant to land with you. And hopefully the clunkiness of it all didn't dissuade you from listening. And hopefully it speaks to you on whatever level it needs to speak to you. I ask you, if you know me personally, and not even me personally, but if you see a Christian out there and they're not living in the way that you feel a Christian should, and what I mean by that is like, if you've never read the Bible, but we have this perception that Christians are like perfect. They should be living a perfect life. And a lot of people stay away from the faith or Christianity is because they see people like that. They say they're Christians, but they're like, I don't know, yelling at their wife or drinking or smoking or whatever, right? All of us are imperfect. All of us. And don't be like me where you stay away from reading about, learning about, talking about, discussing about God, Jesus, because of the way people that claim to be Christian, I don't want to say claim to be Christian, that are Christian, but are living an imperfect life. We all have our own journey. And yes, other Christians should call them out in the right way, or at least bring it to their attention, right? But we're all imperfect. All of us are imperfect. And that's why Jesus died on the cross for us, for our sins. And at the end of the day, read it for yourself. Read it to try to understand. Don't read it to try to disprove. Or you can try to disprove it, just read it. I don't know. Like, try to understand as a student. And try to learn how to pray. And I used that example about water earlier, but that good intent and how you focus that energy on someone will change them on a molecular level, i.e., prayer. Or the opposite, which we know is true also because people talk about it all the time. Negative energy will impact somebody as well. Everyone knows, like, when that negative person comes in the room and then they leave that funk. They changed us on a molecular level. So keep that in mind. If you don't take away anything from what I've said today, there's something more to this life. There's more different layers to this reality. There's different realities. And then there's a common reality, right? Listen to your intuition, learn how to pray. It doesn't have to be this perfect prayer. Just talk to God. I talk to God. I haven't been doing it as much lately because I fall short too. I am trying, and I have to trust that God knows my heart, right? I have to believe that He knows my heart. He knows my intent. And they say you can tell a Christian by the fruits, right? And I hope that I've been leading that type of life. And I know I'm going to fall short, as we all do. But I believe that this life, I've always felt this, I've always known this, but I never kind of connected it to heaven. I know this life is temporary, and I know it continues on after this if you just look at energy and what that is. And energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It's always there. It's all around us, whether we see it or not. So this energy, this light that we have, this soul, will continue on afterwards. And I believe that I will be with my loved ones again. And now I just hope I live a life where I could earn I don't want to say earn, that God will allow me into heaven, but I also know I got to do my part. I don't know fully what that part is. I'm learning to just let go and just be myself and talk about the things that I feel pulled to talk about. And this is one of them. Was it clunky? Yes. Was it perfect? No. But crashing convos, like, they're crashing and sometimes they're clunky and sometimes they're flowing well. This is a dance, right? Two humans most of the time learning to get in coherence with one another in conversation and kind of going back and forth, right? I do feel like this is a dying art with AI and every other technology, and trying to silo off each individual, each soul to the algorithm and separate each other and give us the idea that we're more connected. And that's a whole different podcast. But if anything I shared with you today has helped you, at the very least, understand that I'm not perfect, or has helped you in a way to see God, Jesus differently, or do you feel that this was help somebody else, please share this with them. If you have any comments or any subjects that you would like me to discuss, I can do my research. This was kind of off the cuff, but I hope you got something from it. Please share, like, subscribe with a friend. And as always, thank you for your time, your patience, and your presence. Hope you have a good one. God bless.